Prevention, they say, is better than cure. In this area, that saying is not applicable because prevention is the only solution in this area. Not better, only solution. Why? Because there is currently no cure. So, since there is no cure for now, dementia disease, prevention is our only best bet. And it's our only chance to stop this debilitating, destructive, degenerative disease that is swooping the world. Let me take you down memory lane. Yes, the memory. You know, get it? Things that we should be remembering. And then because of some things, we don't. Hi everyone, I'm Toyin Okunuga. I'm your Hush to All author and your self-realization mindset expert. Thanks again for joining me today in this very vital topic. And today it is how childhood trauma, how it causes dementia. So I have got my invisible teaching hat on. And I'll just go straight into it. So statistics on dementia. I will tell you shortly what dementia is, but let's see what the statistics says about dementia. So currently more than 55 million people live with dementia. I've got my notes here, my slides, worldwide that is. And there are nearly 10 million new cases every year. So dementia results from a variety of diseases and injuries that primarily or secondarily affect the brain. So everything's about the brain here. Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. So Alzheimer's is actually a type of dementia and may contribute to 60 to 70% of the dementia cases. So in the UK, 850,000 people have dementia. And in Nigeria, in 2015, they said 318 people. Now I emphasize 2015 because I'm sure there are tons more people that have it. And in the US, 5.8 million people have dementia. So we can see the dilemma that we have. So what exactly is dementia? So dementia is a syndrome in which there is deterioration in the cognitive function. So there's a slowdown or a sort of like backward way in the cognitive function beyond what would normally be expected of someone who is growing older, you know, who is aging. So the consequences of biological aging, it's actually an unusual way, the deterioration of the brain. So dementia has physical, psychological, social and economic impacts, not only for the people living with dementia, but also their carers, of course, families and society at large. You are watching me, I'm sure you know someone or even might be caring for someone who has dementia. And Alzheimer's, of course, because it's a form of dementia, it's also part of the same issue that has. But Alzheimer's specifically, it's the first sign is short-term memory loss. This develops to further symptoms, including more severe memory problems, confusion, disorientation, personality changes, you know, being very aggravating, you know, language and speech are also affected. So AD, the Alzheimer's disease, it affects the brain physically. So the physical structure, check one of my videos when I spoke about how my mindfulness helped me with my daddy trauma. You check that, how I spoke about the physical functionality of the brain. So what happens and why exactly do I feel that childhood trauma contributes or is actually one of the reasons why people have dementia? So remember, I'm talking about the brain now, and in one of my videos I have been speaking about the brain. So what is the structure? What happens to the brain? That is the key thing. That why do dementia patients become how they do become, if it's to do with the brain. So I'm going to go a little bit technical on you, but I'll try and explain as much as I can. So the way it affects the brain, as you know, I've also said that I'm doing a lot of neuro studies in psychology. This is one of my neuroscience models that I did, and I did it some years back actually in one of my studies, research, and then I'm now doing a module on it, and I thought, oh my word. So in the brain, what happens when you start to see that deterioration, what's happening in the brain is that there's a build-up, which are called plaques, the plaques which are built up around the brain cells, and those brain cells tend to tangle inside the brain cells. I won't go too technical, but there's something that's called amyloid D deposits. So it's deposits around the brain that causes all those features that we can then see visibly in the person. So it results eventually, because it doesn't happen instantaneously, it's over time, and that's why childhood trauma comes into it. So it's over time that there's damage to the brain cells, and the loss of connections between the cells is what results in it. But there's something that's so crucial here that we all talk about every day, but we don't go further, and that's really the key element what I want to go. So AD, Alzheimer's disease, which is part of dementia, is progressive, meaning it gets worse over time. So it starts and you don't really notice until bang, there's something you said, oh, uncle, I said you should get that for me yesterday. You said, no, you didn't. Memory loss. All those little signs, let's be vigilant just in case I'm not saying definitely that will be the case, but memory loss slowly is what you can start to recognize. So childhood trauma, how does it come into it? So the traumatic experiences during childhood, such as physical, sexual, or psychological abuse, increases the risk of mental illnesses in adulthood. Why? Because it also has to do with the brain, as I've said many a times in my video. So the neurobiological mechanism by which this occurs, they say, is unknown, but I beg to differ because of my own personal story and what happened to me. And read Hosh to Raw, you'll see how I was gradually getting into that memory loss cycle. So get your Hosh to Raw. It's on Amazon. There's a link to where it is in Nigeria. It's worldwide, Amazon. Get your Hosh to Raw, I promise you. So as I was saying, in childhood, the structure, when they've gone through something that is so traumatic, like I did, you know my story, different ones, including sexual abuse from a very close family member that I went through. So this environmental stress, it increases. Now, this is gospel, which I'm going to slow down just to explain very briefly. So there's something within our brain which is called the striatum. Now, the striatum, I'm not going to go all technical on you, but I'm going to go into it just because there's an element that I'd like to emphasize, and that is dopamine. Now, dopamine, I've said in so many of my videos to say dance and release happy brain chemicals, which is dopamine. It will make you happy, it will make you have pleasure, it will make you motivated. Now, it goes deeper. So that is all very fine and it's all very true. But what is really key, which is the neuroscience of dopamine, which we must be attentive about, and why I'm doing what I'm doing to stop the horrific crime, is what happens to children if we're not intentional about our healing and preventing this. As I said, there's no cure for Alzheimer's, the dementia at the moment. So prevention is key, that we stop childhood trauma. Why? Because what happens when you are undergoing adverse experiences as a child is that you are not motivated to do things that make you happy. Dopamine, brain chemicals. So we are not, like when I was very unhappy as a child, that time my brain was not releasing enough dopamine. So dopamine, that neurotransmitter, which is also a hormone, that is meant to put some lovely brain chemicals into the striatum. So the striatum is an area, it's the midbrain, it's a very deep area in our brain. Now this striatum is like, it's what reaches out, it's waiting for some dopamine to use that would then connect into a direct pathway into our thalamus. I'm not going to go into what that is, but eventually it's meant to get to our cortex. Now, what is the cortex? We have the mid cortex, we have the prefrontal cortex, I say the logical reasoning. So that is where that dopamine deposit, it also deposits different areas like the limbic and other areas, but I want to focus on where the memory is. Now, the memory, where it's the place where the dopamine is stopping, is the striatum. So the striatum, it stops from getting into the brain. So this is why people eventually get Alzheimer's, and dementia. Now, I'm not medical, I'm not a psychologist. This is academic. This is my research, this is my studying, what I'm being taught by one of the top universities, and so what happens, and also Parkinson's disease, what happens, why they get it is because there's a blockage where the dopamine is meant to get into the striatum. That striatum, it has different cells that have to take that dopamine from us, and some of it's like from the caudate, it has its region within the striatum, the putamen and the nucleus accumbens. Now, I won't go into all those areas, but the main thing here is that what happens when you're so sad, like I was, when we're going through a lot of traumatic experiences as a child, it means your dopamine, you're starving the cells that produce dopamine. It's almost like a neuron cell death. So we are killing the neurons that are meant to produce those brain chemicals that are happy. When you're happy and you smile, you are releasing some chemicals that will help you get into the prefrontal cortex that will, from the striatum is the main area here. The very deep area in the brain is meant to get that dopamine and then transmit it into all areas of our brain. So what happens as a child, if you are constantly sad, you are starving your brain gradually of that dopamine. So when people go into depression, it's because they are so sad. So that is what's happening. So, and if that continues all through your life and you don't find a way to heal, you are starving the striatum. The striatum, which is the brain inside there, is not able to transport the dopamine into areas that will allow you have good memory. You remember, memory loss is what starts to happen. It's an area that will now start to starve. So the dopamine, if you've not heard me in another video, I said it plays a vital role, and in reward movement regulation is what that dopamine is. So it's like a reward system. So if in my instance now, when I was getting abused or when I was changing from family to family, all I could see was negativity. So I was starving that I didn't see good rewards. So my dopamine was being stopped in the pathway to get to the striatum. I'm not saying it's immediate. It's not immediate, like it's shut down, because otherwise I won't be speaking to you, right? And you might be wondering, I'm still here. I'll get there. But it's over time. You will not know. But over time, you are not having retentive memory. You're having what is called dopamine deficiency. It's not like it goes away immediately, but that's why you realize people are having dementia at a very old age. That's because over time, not the only reason, by the way, not just adverse experiences, it could be hereditary, but adverse childhood experiences is one of those, which I did my research. There's still a lot of research going on because they're using rodents, but I have done my own research, and from my own personal journey, I'm like, whoa, that's why. So I can confidently say that I was almost dopamine deficient. That's why my learning, my memory, I could tell then that I was not having, and that's what happens. And that's why prevention is the only way, because right now, unless you're watching me here and you feel, Toyin, that's not true, there is a cure, please pop it in the comments and say there is a cure for dementia, because right now, as I'm speaking to you in 2022, there is no cure. And that's why I said prevention is not better than cure. Prevention is the only survival we have to stop this debilitating disease, at least a percentage of it that relates to childhood trauma. We need to get a grip of it and say no to sexual abuse, childhood maltreatment. Why? Because later in life, because of their adverse experiences, they have starved the dopamine in their brain. They will be dopamine deficient, and those levels would need to get heightened. And now this is why a lot of people who are on drugs, they are trying to increase their dopamine, and if they do it so much, they'll never get satisfied. So people who are on cocaine, for instance, they'll always want more because their dopamine levels can never get satisfied, so they keep wanting more and more. Now that is like the extreme. But if you have gone through an adverse experience like I have, now I have not gone and undergone any thing in terms of using drugs or anything. What I've done is more natural. You can join my program to see a lot of things that I've done. But what are the symptoms of dopamine deficiency levels? And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, well, what if I'm thinking I'm going to get dementia? Calm down, calm down. What I'd say is, these are some things that if you feel you're always tired, I'm not saying, you know how the brain is and how the world is, there's so many things that could relate to anything, so don't take this as gospel. Just take precaution, and if you've had adverse experiences and you've not shared your story, that's fine. Just heal first and start to take incremental steps. But what are the symptoms of dopamine deficiency that could later result in dementia? You lack motivation. So if you're always having depressive symptoms, I would say get yourself now to a doctor and check yourself in now, so that you can start replenishing your dopamine, so that later it does not result in something devastating that has no cure. So please, I love you, please take charge of your life and just go and start dealing with any depressive thoughts that you're having. So if you're always tired, you can't concentrate, you're moody, you're anxious, you don't feel pleasure. Pleasure is that dopamine that you're meant to feel pleasure. If you don't feel that, if you're, something you previously enjoyed, you're depressed, you feel hopeless, you have a very low sex drive, you have trouble sleeping, I remember having that, or you have disturbed. So you see why childhood mental health will be a possible avenue for early prevention strategies targeting Alzheimer's disease. And we know that further underlying mechanisms require further exploration. But for now, chronic stress, we know as a child, if it goes unchecked, could, and I say could, I would almost say will. If you do not attend to it, you are at a very high risk of getting dementia. So depleted dopaminergic areas could that relates to adverse childhood experiences, and it could be restless leg syndrome, like shaking of the legs. They say Parkinson's, depression, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So you might be thinking, right, but I know, oh yeah, we're already taking supplements. That's fine. But please note again, allergen medical disclaimer before I go on to read what supplements. This is not based on medical advice. This is simply educational purposes only. If you feel you had any, or have, or know someone who has any of those symptoms I read out, vitamins, you might want to start that way before you boost your way up. But this disclaimer here, this is not medical advice, and you seek medical attention. But when I started to know a lot about myself, I started to take a lot of vitamins, I started to eat well. I've shown you a picture before in one of my videos where I put on so much weight. I started to look after myself. I thought, oh my gosh, dementia. And that was then years ago. So supplements that increase dopamine level, they say tyrosine, I don't know, that could have natural amino acid, but vitamin D, omega-3 essential fatty acids, magnesium. As well, eating high magnesium foods. Again, disclaimer, if you're allergic to any of these things, it's just my advice to say eating well is doing something within you, not outside, that will help you. Green tea, I always tell people that I've always had green tea. No, that's my lemon. I always have green tea and honey every day, and lemon. Watermelon, they say, is good. Turmeric, tomatoes, a lot of things that can help you sort of like, raise those dopamine levels. But I would say it's difficult with children, because I know as a parent, I constantly strive to do the best I can for my children, and things that can cause, or that might have caused childhood trauma to people, as I said, could be physical, could be sexual abuse, it could be actually divorce. So it could be the loss of a loved one. All these are things that drain your happiness, right? So it's things that drain your happiness. So right now I'm very intentional, because of course I've recently divorced and I've got 2 children. Even though they're teenagers and young adults, I'm still very mindful about how they are. So I'm very intentional about how I talk to them, how we speak, and I know that I can't take it for granted that they're grown up, because now they might be thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to go there, look at my mum. So these are the things that I now work intentionally with my own children. If anything, I just pray to God, but I continue to pray to God to fill in the gaps where I fall short with my kids. I strive to be intentional, and I do worry just like everyone else because of my own experience, but I see that, oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus, for making my children whole. I know I can't do everything for them like you can't, but we can do things and stop things that are devastating, the way things that I went through, that you have gone through as a child. And I continue to ask for the wisdom of God for me to step aside and to take my mothering hen body out of the way so that God can take charge, because I can be a mothering hen. And even though I know my kids are resilient, I know your kids are resilient, I know they might not know how to articulate the transition that's going through in my life or in your life for that instance, just the way my parents didn't know the impact of the transition from one parent to another would impact me growing up. But also we all have unique experiences. I pray we all seek the wisdom to be the best parents and carers that our children deserve, and for God to give us the tender hearts to forgive our parents for our own unmet expectations of them. So that's it from me. And yes, so dementia is when dopamine is stopped in an area that it needs to get to the brain. That is how dementia, that's how it results in. And then all those functionalities of the dopamine are the things that are exhibited through someone who has dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson, is because the striatum has stopped receiving the dopamine that's needed for movement, regulation, motion, speech, and all those. That is the brain. And then you have to think, how do I get dopamine to continue so I don't have dementia? Adverse childhood experiences is extreme sadness. I had to find beauty in myself. I had to start loving me. I had to stop ignoring things. I had to forgive my father for sexually abusing me and cut off some people where I knew it was toxic, because I knew that my brain was being affected. So you have to do the right thing for you. You only have one dance and it's your own. So dance your dance. Heal from those adverse experiences, because your childhood, if gone untreated and it was adverse, could later result into a devastating, debilitating, degenerative disease, which is dementia. I love you guys. And remember, your inner child, that child, yes, it wasn't your fault when you were a child, but now that you're an adult and you also see people, even if it's in your family, that are doing something horrific to a child, just think about it. Do you want that child growing up to get dementia or to have something worse? Even worse, commit suicide, because a lot of people do. Let's all love each other, because we're all here to be happy, and call people out. That inner child, it needs a voice. It's crying for a voice. Don't suppress it. Don't suppress other people's or the children that you can see are being abused. Let's all let those voices roar. Thank you.